What's going on, Chargers fan? As the dust has settled, what's going on, everybody? Now that the dust has settled on the 2022 NFL draft, trying to go through this LA Chargers draft to see where they could have improved, maybe taken a little bit of a better player. Because I didn't know, a lot of times you don't know what your favorite NFL team is going to do, because they could sometimes pick a guy because he has a good RAS score or RAS score, which is relative athletic score, where it kind of goes through a 0 through 10 of everything like speed, agility, quickness, all this other stuff, and like a lot of your stuff at the combine as well. But sometimes most of these, not most, but a lot of these guys don't even do or get these numbers graded a lot. So a lot of times you don't have a complete RAS score. But I don't know, because sometimes it seemed like the Chargers made a selection because the score was higher, or they just did it because obviously they have a one-on-one with most of these players, so they have the ability to talk with them, see what they're really made of, and how much they're willing to put forward to this season and for this team and for their new brothers on the team. But I'm just kind of go through at least a numbers based about what I think maybe the Chargers could have gotten a little bit better here and there according to the RAS score, and maybe how it would have turned out different if they went that way, because it seemed like a lot of the picks, they did go in that direction. But to me, it was kind of questioning, because I went through a couple of the rounds and looked at players at the same position after them, and the scores might have been a little bit better. So let's go through and see what draft we can make. Probably won't give like a full number of what the guys were, but I'll tell you who got the highest grade out of the guys that I at least like, that were sort of similar to the guy that they drafted. So round one, not going to really change much. I do, as you've heard a lot in like a lot of my mock drafts, I've loved Zion Johnson the past 2 years. I thought he was one of the better interior offensive linemen, and maybe they could have gotten him if they went back a little bit, but I'm pretty sure someone would have picked him up sooner than later. And I just kind of liked to go through to see who else was available in that first round at that time, and just to really quick compare their RAS score. So speaking of Zion Johnson, his score was a 9.55, which is pretty great out of 10. So a lot of his numbers averages were great, but that's pretty good. But another guy they were possibly thinking about was cornerback Trent McDuffie, that I know a lot of fans wanted. But according to his RAS score, it was a 9.49. It's a little bit under, but obviously different positions. But overall, it's saying that Johnson is still a more athletic, more complete, I guess, athletic player than McDuffie was. Going on to another guy that was available, like a Jermaine Johnson, the second or third, I forget which one it is. But he slipped all the way down the draft to like the late 20s to the Jets, who went back in to trade for him. And his score was pretty off the charts. It was a 9.86. So kind of expect that for a guy who was supposed to be going, who a lot of people mocked in the top 10, but for some reason fell down. Don't know if he interviewed badly. That's also why these guys can go down. Just like another guy, Nakobe Dean. He was there for the first round. He thought he was going to get selected in the first round. Everybody assumed that, but then for some reason doesn't get selected to the third round. And I kind of maybe heard it was due to an injury, that people were unsure if he was going to be available at the start of the season or the rookie minicamp coming up soon, but I guess he will be. So it is still kind of interesting why he dropped, just because of measurables. If you met with the guy and you liked him, why wouldn't they pick him? So it's kind of weird. And another guy in the first round they could have gone with, Trevor Penning, who pretty much scored the highest RAS score of the guys that were mocked to the Chargers here at 17. He scored a 9.96. So obviously his score was better than Johnson's, but they still went with Johnson because probably he interviewed better and they liked him more. So I don't know, it's pretty interesting to see how that would have turned out if you go by those scores overall, instead of having the one-on-one conversations which us fans don't get to have. But it's pretty interesting to see going by that score. Even in the third round, when they finally picked, I know they went with JT Woods, who is obviously His numbers were good, 6'2". He ran a 4.36, and his score was like a 9.43. So that's pretty high. But other guys who were similar positions at that strong safety position that were drafted after him, Kirby Joseph of Illinois. He's another guy, pretty similar size, 6'1", ran a 4.3 to a 4.6, so he was kind of up and down. And then his RAS score wasn't available because he didn't complete a lot of stuff that was officially timed. But he was like considered a top 7 in like a 90 percentile according to PFF, which is another numbers-based type of statistics that they kind of put all together to see how good of a player is going to be. A lot of times they're right and a lot of times they are wrong, but that was a guy who was pretty similar that went right after. And then another guy, Dane Belton out of Iowa. He was 6'1", 4.43, which is a lot similar to Woods, and his score was actually a 9.42. So you're splitting hairs when it comes to, you know, a guy just being 0.01 less than the other. So you could have went with either of those guys, but they ended up going with JT Woods over him. So who knows if they could be just as good, or, you know, maybe one will outplay the other one. But that's pretty interesting. And then like round 4, they went with Isaiah Spiller at 6 foot, ran a 4.64 40, and his RAS score is actually a 5.71, which is kind of low. It's like definitely in the 50 percentile. But guys who were selected after him, running backs in that same round, include that I kind of liked a little bit more maybe were Tyler Algier, who went to Atlanta. He's like 5'11", so not that much difference. He ran a 4.6 as well around there, but his RAS score was a 7.02. So obviously almost 2 points higher than Spiller. And then Hassan Haskins, who's 6'2", ran a 4.58, but a lot of his RAS score numbers were unavailable because he didn't really work out. But a couple guys they may have could have gone with, obviously the RAS score, if you were going by that, they would have went with Algier, who was also a bigger type of back and kind of ran a similar speed. But I guess they like the versatility and how the whole interview went with Spiller. So either way, it could have been a good thing if you're looking at that number. A good pick either way, but pretty interesting to see who they could have gotten. Round 5, they went with Otito Ogbonnia. I believe that's how you say his last name. Obviously, they go by different measures here, but 6'4", and his RAS score was a 4.75, which is under the 50%. And I guess it's because his explosion and speed were pretty low according to that. But other guys that were same position selected right after him, Matthew Butler of Tennessee, who went to the Raiders, was obviously the same size, 6'4", but his RAS score was a 7.25, and his speed and explosion were like a lot higher than Otito's was. And another guy, John Ridgway III, who a lot of people liked for Chargers fans, he's 6'5", but his RAS score was 4.68, obviously low speed and explosion as well, like Otito. But pretty similar guys overall, but obviously, even though someone with the highest score in Butler went to our rival, we'll see how he does. Apparently, he's going to be better according to that RAS score. But, you know, they went with Otito, who I only have a problem with because the way he tackles, he kind of like wraps the guy and then falls backwards instead of just fully going forward to tackle, which is kind of weird. You might get a horse collar here and there or pull a helmet off in the NFL, which I hope he doesn't. But yeah, that was my only bigger issue with him, other than me being a USC fan and him playing for UCLA. Round 6, they went with Jamari Sailor, who I liked a lot. Obviously a very good pickup here, but when you go to the measurables with him, obviously 6'3", and his RAS score was a 4.15, under the 50 percentile. And another guy who was selected pretty soon after that to Carolina, I believe, was Cade Mays out of Tennessee. He's 6'5", so a little bit taller for like an interior offensive lineman, but he ended up scoring a 7.57, so obviously a lot higher. But they went with Sailor. I haven't heard his last name said correctly yet. But who knows who's going to be better or not. But according to this weird score, it says you should have taken Cade Mays instead, but they like Sawyer a lot more. So I don't know. We'll see. Then like the other round 6, they went with Ja'Sir Taylor, who had some interesting numbers. He was 5'10", ran a 4.3, but his score was at 8.29, which is pretty high. Pretty sure that's why they chose him. But there are other guys available, similar position, like Tariq Castro-Fields, who got selected thereafter. I think he went to the 49ers, could be mistaken. But he was 6'1", ran a 4.38, a little bit quicker, not that much, but his RAS score was a 9.74, so nearly a 10. So he could have been interesting to have. Montaric Brown, who I liked a bit more, but also same position. 6 foot, 4.55 in the 40, and his RAS score was a 4.25. So that, according to that, would have been a bad pick. And then Bo Melton was available there in that 6th round, who I liked a lot as a wide receiver. He's 5'11", ran a 4.3, and his RAS score was an 8.78. So that's pretty high, but they still like the idea of, they didn't take a wide receiver in this draft, huh? Which I kind of thought maybe they should have, especially this late, because he's with that speed, he still could have helped you on special teams, but maybe he just didn't have a desire to do whatever he could for the team, which probably Ja'Sir Taylor would have. But then round 7 became interesting because there were a lot more better players available according to this RAS score, but we'll go through. So they went with Dean Leonard, the Chargers did, 6 foot, ran a 4.3, and his score was a 7.67, which is pretty good. Also could have went with Chase Lucas, who went pretty soon after. He was 5'11", ran a 4.48, and his score was an 8.89, which is a little bit better. Christian Holmes out of Oklahoma State, he is 6'1", ran at 4.5, so a little bit slower, but his score was a 9.10, so pretty close to 10. Interesting. Then Kalen Barnes, who obviously broke records with his speed from Baylor, he was 5'11", ran a 4.23, which is quicker, but his score was a 6.31. So yeah, you could be very athletic. And I remember like even the running, like a cornerback from USC, his RAS score is pretty good. Isaac Taylor-Stewart, like definitely top 10 of according to his position, and yet he still went undrafted and signed with Dallas. So that's kind of weird how this score is looked at. And then Jalen Watson is a cornerback from Washington State. He was the highest. He is 6'2", ran a 4.51, so a little bit slower than who they selected, but his score was a 9.21. So that's pretty interesting if that same position was available. A little bit taller, maybe could have played safety, I doubt it, but they still went with Dean Leonard. Another guys, notable mentions, Dawson Deaton, center / interior offensive lineman. He actually, I think, scored the highest out of everybody. He's obviously 6'5", good size, but his RAS score was a 9.71, which is pretty high for someone going that late in the draft, but for some reason he was still there. I don't know if it was injuries or how he interviewed, you never know. Rasheed Walker was another guy in mock drafts that I saw, top 2 or 3, 4 rounds, but for some reason he fell all the way this late, 6'6", but also a lot of his scores were not available, so maybe he's injured or once again did not perform well in those stuff, so he didn't want anything official, so you never know. Isaiah Pacheco, who's a running back I liked from Rutgers, 5'10", not too bad of size, ran a 4.37, which is pretty good, a little bit quicker than Spiller, and his score was an 8.81, which is 2 or 3 points higher than Spiller was, and you're getting him in the 7th round. But like I said, it could be interviews, injuries, I don't know, and plus your GM and coach are gonna make the decisions anyways, and this is what they came up with. But another guy, obviously round 7, Xander Hovarth. I don't have a problem with him. He was the one that kind of got my attention with this RAS score because he scored really high. He had a 9.83. He was one of the highest out of all the players looked at, but nobody was probably looking to draft him because he's like a fullback / running back. He played more running back instead of blocking for the Purdue Boilermakers, but they still, I think the Chargers see him as a Swiss Army knife and could use him everywhere. But another notable mention who they could have signed because he went undrafted or in that 7th round was a cornerback from Alabama who I thought was going to go way higher and at least half the draft, but didn't, and Josh Jobe, who I always thought was talented, but 5'11", not that bad of size for a corner, but a lot of his RAS score and PFF, all those numbers were not available as well. So I can see why people were hesitant in getting him, and maybe there was an injury or not. I thought he did suffer one during the year. I forget if that was last year. So you never know. So it is pretty interesting when you go through and look at who they could have gotten, who they did get, when you consider this RAS score and maybe who was available that got selected right after, because you never know, obviously, in the live draft. But when you go back, maybe the Chargers could have made a different pick here and there if they knew a guy was going to be available or not for that next pick. And they did trade away 2 of their 7ths, but we all know they weren't going to keep that many guys from this draft class. It's just too much money, and they'd rather spend it on a veteran to help them right away anyways. But yeah, overall, it's pretty interesting experiment here. Not that crazy. It took a little bit to get all the numbers correct, but yeah, overall, you just never know what these GMs or coaches are, what they're thinking, or who they are going to select. It's they look at these guys for the past 2 or 3, sometimes 4 years, or when they're coming out of high school, they scout them, or at least their scouting department does. So you can fall in love with a certain player and he's going to be your guy. At least they got players from well-known schools, which is a lot different than what they have done or what Tom Telesco has done in the past. But overall, I think that's a step up. And the guys that came in aren't bad players. They definitely got drafted for certain reasons. But overall, we'll see what the Chargers can do here in the 2022. Is it still 2022 season or 2023? I don't know. Super Bowl will be in 2023. Oh well. Thanks for watching, people. Like and subscribe. Comment down below. Let me know what y'all think. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.